Hi, so it's been a minute. Popping back on here to do a fun little three-part series in the week leading up to my 31st birthday. Um, I had started sharing more online in the months leading up to my 28th birthday 3 years ago, and then my life changed a lot. And so, a little bit before my 28th birthday, I had started sharing what was intended to be like 27 lessons or learnings that I had during my 27 years. And I think I only ended up sharing 5 of them. And at the time, I was sharing on TikTok. And so, this is rather, kind of an effort and a way to close that loop. It felt like worthwhile and healing for me to continue that in this avenue. So yeah, I have prepared 30 little nuggets that I want to share, and the final 5 are the original ones that I had prepared 3 years ago. And those are still available where I had originally posted them on my TikTok. And I'll link that below. And so the first one here that I wanted to highlight, and these are in no particular order either. I just kind of blopped them down. But this one happens to be first, and I would also say it's one of the more foundational ones for me in my journey, has been like connecting with my breath. So this is something that I didn't really realize was disconnected for me until 3 years ago. I was experiencing a lot of stress in my life, and it was starting to affect my sleep in some pretty significant ways. And my primary care provider at the time had recommended that I start like some anti-anxiety medication. I was initially resistant to doing that, but once I actually started to take the medicine, because of some more severe physical symptoms that started, which is a whole separate story. Once I started on medication, I realized that I was able to breathe more deeply, and I realized that I hadn't been doing that my whole life, which was kind of a crazy experience and realization that that had been something I was just experiencing like under the surface, and I wasn't really aware of it. I didn't know it wasn't normal to not be able to get a deep breath. And so after starting medication and just kind of being able to regulate that a bit more, now whenever I have trouble getting a deep breath, I'm able to identify that as anxiety. And then even before I had started medication, a couple months prior, I had started just practicing breath work and meditation a little bit, and was finding like more relaxation and focus through it. I think it originally got on my radar, I think it was during COVID, like listening to, I want to say, Brene Brown's podcast. I think at the end she would ask people like the same question, and it was something around like, what do you do when you're stressed? Like, what's the first thing you do? And I would notice like episode by episode, like a common theme, like people would keep reporting like, I take a deep breath. And so yeah, that just kind of stuck out to me as like interesting, like there's probably something to this. That's the first one, of just kind of becoming more in touch with your breath. I also have some interesting out there spiritual theories and feelings about like the Holy Spirit, and just kind of like this notion of like, is the Holy Spirit like our breath, and like can we connect like with the Holy Spirit like through connecting with our breath? I don't know. there's just some thoughts I've had there. I'm gonna pause that one. I'm gonna end that one and go to the next because we have 30. The second one I have, I'm not gonna go too deep here, but it's building a practice with your dreams. So when I was hospitalized right before my birthday a couple years ago, 3 years ago, I was misdiagnosed, and it was a really interesting experience being in the hospital. Basically, I got misdiagnosed and put on a medication that I didn't realize but had kind of taken away my dreams. And so after I left the hospital, I had to work for many, many months with an outpatient psychiatrist, and we like slowly decreased the dosage of this medication. And I want to say it was at least like 8 months later. So it was by the time I had moved from North Carolina to Illinois. I'd gotten established with a therapist in Illinois. So yeah, I want to say it was at least like 8-ish months later that I was fully off of that medication, and I started dreaming again. And that's when I realized that I hadn't been dreaming that whole time. But anyways, I think the absence of something, once it returns, you are much more cognizant of it. And I remember speaking with my therapist about it, and she recommended like just starting a practice of writing down my dreams. And so I did, and that has just kind of built upon itself. I'll just leave it there for now. But that has been a really beautiful experience to like further connect with myself. The third one here is reducing like external noise and stimuli and just quieting clutter so that I can start to sort through like open tabs. This one is kind of minimal in what I wrote here, but I think I touch on it more in further nuggets later. But I think we're constantly going, and we very often have like music or podcasts. And when I say we, I'm generalizing, but I'm also kind of thinking of myself at different points in my life that has been very normal, that I'm used to having like an input. And I have found a lot of value in giving myself time and space without input, so that I can start to just better integrate and be. Because I don't think we're supposed to like constantly be consuming information like that. Like I'm not convinced like our minds, our bodies, our souls, our spirits, our beings are quite designed for that. I think we're supposed to get a little bit bored sometimes. I think we're supposed to have time and space to just like not be constantly receiving like that. And again, when I say we, I'm thinking about my own experience primarily, so do with it what you will. The fourth one here, and this is another one that could be a little spicy, little dicey, so I'll again gently say like this is my own experience. I'm primarily sharing to document like my process, my journey. I know that everybody has their own journey with this stuff, but this piece here has been really important kind of like in my healing process, and it has been stepping back from weed. So I used to pretty frequently use weed recreationally, and stepping back from it has been one of the biggest things that has kind of moved the needle in terms of like my healing, and has also allowed me to just kind of like unlock like memories and experiences that I didn't realize I had just like buried completely. I could talk at length about it, but I think now that I've stepped away from it, I can see there were 3 distinct times that I think God was really clearly trying to show me and tell me to step away from it. And it wasn't until the 3rd time that I was able to kind of receive that message. And I'll keep it relatively high level, and it's like a fascinating story and experience, but I'll suffice it to say it involved just kind of learning more about how weed affects the brain. And if you've experienced some form of mental health episode or psychosis, which I think in part is what I experienced in early 2023, which is when those 3 like simultaneous life crises occurred for me. Even though I wasn't using weed at the exact moments that those things were happening, I had used weed recreationally prior to that. So I think like it's in my body, it's in my brain. I think it played a role. So basically, if you've experienced drug-induced psychosis, which I hadn't really thought about it like that, but I think in part that's what happened. If you've experienced a psychotic episode and you've been someone who uses weed and you continue to use weed, you are at a pretty high risk of developing schizophrenia. And so I didn't realize this. None of the doctors or clinicians I've seen over the years, both inpatient, outpatient, and I've seen a number of primary care therapists, psychiatrists, who were aware that I used weed recreationally. None of them shared this information with me. Had I known this information, I think I would have moved differently, because my brain is important to me, and I don't think I would have put myself at that level of risk, but I didn't know what I didn't know. So anyways, learning that, I was like, okay, like noted. Again, like my brain is important to me. I want to take care of my brain and my body and my life. And so yeah, that is really kind of what caused me to step away from it. So in doing that, as I mentioned before, it's really allowed me to unlock and access memories that have just kind of been under the radar. And it's allowed me to see how like really since like young adulthood until now, I've used some form or combination of overindulging in food, using alcohol or validation from others, or dating and men, or weed, just to kind of like numb and cope, and just to move through life and just to kind of feel okay, and kind of just to numb like some of the trauma and the difficult experiences that I've experienced. I didn't quite realize I was doing that until I stepped away from these things. And again, everybody is on their own journey, and I'm not at all demonizing any of these behaviors or things. I'm just saying that for me, like stepping back from some of these behaviors and substances has really allowed for me to step into a new chapter where I've been able to more fully meet myself and enter more full healing from these experiences. It's allowed me to kind of step into more full healing from things that happened in my childhood, as well as things that happened in my marriage and the subsequent separation and divorce. And I've allowed myself to go slow and go gently, because these things are not easy. And I think that's why I avoided them for so long without quite realizing that that's what I was doing. But there's been a lot of deep like beauty and healing in doing this work, and a lot of clarity that has come with it too, and just renewed purpose. Like I used to think and say like, you know, I just want to kind of get through the day, get through the work day, and then be able to like, you know, use weed at night, have dinner, watch a show, and just basically like turn my brain off is what I would say. And then after learning about some of the science regarding like schizophrenia and things like that, and the person who shared this information with me, he told me how like basically like if you continue smoking weed, like this is what you're doing to your brain every time. He like did this, like acted this out for me like while we're on an airplane, and I think that just obviously left like a very like visceral impression in my mind. And yeah, especially given those reflections of like I used to voice and verbalize that desire of like I just want to turn my brain off at the end of the day. So like in relation to what he shared of like this is what you're doing, like you're harming your brain, you're pushing it, you know, to a point, and it's possible that you could push it to a point that it doesn't recover from. You could push it to a point where you develop a condition that you then require care, like lifelong care from others, and you're not the same person. So anyways, that's just kind of been my journey. I don't want to make any rash decisions or move into anything with like a spirit of fear, and I don't think that's how I am moving. I think I'm moving with just holding different pieces of information and doing the best that I can with the information that I have. And during this season of my life, it makes sense to just take a little step back and see how that feels. And it has felt like clarity and like healing for this moment that I'm in. Okay, the next one, number 5, is similar. This one is just generally being mindful as possible about what I consume. So specifically here, I was thinking about kind of like alcohol and processed foods. So I'd watched a video or read something prior to my trip to Europe last September, and it was something about like how curious is it that food, entertainment, and alcohol are so accessible here in the States. And I don't know, like something about that just kind of made it click for me. And I've done a lot of reflecting, and I'm still like in a deep learning season when it comes to these topics. But I think for now, my thesis is something regarding like we have free will and freedom of speech and freedom of expression and freedom to choose what we do and do not consume, kind of, right? Like to the extent that we can and to the extent that we know what is in what we're consuming. And we also have the ability to learn and educate ourselves. So, like, what are we gonna do with that? I guess it's up to us, right? So that's that one. And then number 6 is similarly consumption of media and information. So here I wrote being thoughtful here too. Seems as if social media and other online platforms, for example, Gmail, Maps, etc., are kind of sort of maybe being turned against us, like for surveillance purposes, used to hijack our emotional and attentional states, like loosh farming. And I don't know, friends, is what I wrote. Just weird and odd. And I'm reminding myself that this phone, the phones that we use, are tools that we pay for and that we're in charge, I think. I'm pretty sure. And it's weird and crazy then how there are these certain features, like I think about Instagram and like the stories on there, and how the stories expire after 24 hours. And I think that creates this like sense of urgency and like a sense of like a fear of missing out if we're not like posting and engaging and watching other people's stories. And I feel like I've found myself in this loop of almost feeling like it has this little chokehold on me. Like I want to be like posting and engaging and like involved, right? Like I want to be up to date with what my friends are doing, and I want to share what I'm doing. But then I realized, like, wait, like this is so short term and kind of unsatisfactory. Like this is going to disappear in 24 hours. Like that's crazy. Like this kind of feels like a short-term trick, and I think I actually crave more. I want to create something more lasting, whether that's online or offline. And it's kind of wild how susceptible we are to moving along with these nudges and these features that these apps provide to us. I'm not saying that I don't or I won't use stories, maybe a little bit, and I think it's not the end all be all. Like moving into reading actual books and having actual conversations. Like let's not lose these other things. Like let's not let, these things have all the power over us. And yeah. Number 7, creativity. So along a similar-ish line, creating offline too, writing with pen and paper, creating things that are just for me, like not to be consumed or viewed by other people. I think when you create for an audience, you're creating differently than if you create just for yourself. Number 8, getting in touch and rhythm with my cycle. So this has been one of the most beautiful and healing journeys that I've journeyed. I don't think that's a word, but you know what I mean. And I'm still journeying. So someone who experienced sexual abuse as a young girl and then grew up in a Protestant church with very strong purity culture values. I've lived most of my life pretty disconnected from my body, in shame and just disembodied. I also grew up in a culture that cast a lot of shame and ickiness around a woman's time of month. It wasn't until the last couple of years where I really started to learn more about the different phases of the menstrual cycle. I'm astonished, delighted, and slightly rageful to uncover so much information that has been seemingly hidden in plain sight. Information that gives structure and unlocks meaning and insight to what I and a significant portion of the population experience on a monthly basis. I think it's crazy work how we've been led to believe we ought to conform to the standard 40-hour work week, be equated to the male 24-hour circadian rhythm. We are not the same. We are not the same. And I think that is a brilliant gift. Women's liberation has fought for equal rights, and I do believe we are equal in our shared humanity. I do believe it is our shared duty to vote and work to uphold community together, though we are not the same biologically. And I believe we have done women a great disservice by not studying, promoting, and upholding, really revering our cycles as holy, special, and sacred. Because I believe that they are. And I think we would see a changed world if we shifted our view on the female cycle. And I believe that we are shifting our views. I think this is in progress. I don't think I'm the first one to, I know I'm not the first one to suggest these thoughts. These thoughts are a result from the things that I'm learning from others who have blazed this path before me. So yes, if we shift our view on the female cycle to better hold and support women as they navigate the ebbs and flows from within. I think we would find more ability to come together as community to support one another and draw valuable insights and healings. I believe these practices of leaning in and going with our flows would enable progress and healing for not only women, but men as well. Really all of our community. There's a really beautiful quote that I love. It's something like, matriarchy isn't women on top, it's a circle with children and the vulnerable at the center. And I just really love that. I think that these things are important. So I'll leave that there. Number 9, food. So similar to a different one that I mentioned in the last series. Just kind of trying to remove noise, and as I simplify things, this has allowed me to move more slowly and to identify what feels good and nourishing in my body and what things might kind of flare my system up. I've also had a lot of learnings of just kind of like things that are added to our food here in the States. And yeah, this is another fun, like, we have free will and we can learn information, share information, is what it is, right? But yeah, just experiencing, like, when I was in Europe last year for a couple of weeks, like, not having to think so hard about like the different things I was eating versus coming back and just like looking a little bit more curiously at some of the labels and seeing like how much sugar is added to stuff that you would think like sugar shouldn't be added to, and just a lot of like other additives and stuff like that. And you just kind of start to raise an eyeball about like, what is all this about? Like, why is this stuff being added? Like, low-key, like, are we being a little bit poisoned? I don't know. Anyways, number 10. So similar-ish to food, and I don't know if this really qualifies yet as a learning because it's still in progress. And this list is really more just like a list of, you know, somewhat life updates, things that are like in progress, things that I'm like stumbling through, less of like, here are the things that I've learned and know for sure. But one thing that I have been learning about and I'm currently doing like midway through right now is a Parasite cleanse and like a heavy metal cleanse. So yeah, this is just kind of coming from learning about how we can, now I feel a little, I don't want to misspeak on it because I think there's a lot of good information out there. And I actually became an affiliate with this brand for the Parasite cleanse. And so I want to share more on it later after I've finished my cleanse. But I guess the thesis is we can easily get parasites through simply like walking on the beach or through some of our food. And it's not really standard practice in the US to cleanse ourselves of parasites. But this can lead to us having like these worms and these bugs in our systems for years, and they're just kind of like harvesting and living off of our blood and our energy, and like that just feels kind of icky, kind of draining to me. Like, I'd rather that not be the case. So yeah, I think it's just coming from like a desire to learn and like reclaim my energy. So that one's still in progress. I'll share more information later.